Hello, hello. Testing, testing. Hey, my name's Sam. If you are watching this, there is a high probability that you already know what I do, but in case you don't, I make Lightsaber sound fonts. Now, a quick overview, if I can... So, people collect these. This is a lightsaber. And one of the coolest things that you can do, if you have a lightsaber, is you can upload sounds to them. And I make the sounds. That's what I do for fun. I recently made a sound font using only sounds that people that follow me submitted. So it was kind of a fun challenge for me, because normally I have access to my sound library of, you know, things I record for making sound fonts with, but I got all sorts of wacky recordings that I'll show you in just a minute. But anyway, yeah, this is a video to show how those sounds got used, because I think it's interesting, and, well, let's do it. Yeah. Hey, look, I'm tiny now, and down here. I'm gonna go through all of the sounds that I made for my latest sound font called Stitched. There are a lot of sounds that go into making what feels like a realistic lightsaber to swing around, so I'm just gonna show what each of these sounds are made of. So a lot of the sounds that a lightsaber makes involve impacting. I like having a nice baseline punch sound that I can add as a layer to basically everything. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the impact sound that I use in a ton of the sounds that I'm going to show off later. So, hello, I'm editing Sam. I'm just here to fill in some gaps that the other idiot left behind. So the aforementioned punch sound, or the kick, or whatever you want to call it, is made entirely from this single keyboard click sound. That's it! And I've got that right here for reference. I'm going to point to parts of the waveform as I explain how this is made, but the short of it is that it's made from these 4 different parts. I separate them out as the psh, the snare, the click, and the thump. We'll talk about it. So, I guess let's just dig in here. The psh sound, I intended for it to be sort of like the initial snap, like something real high-pitched and like clicky that would engage the sound. The source of this sound is a tiny clip of like somewhere in here. Let's hear it without any effects on it. Marvelous. I know, this is some high-quality stuff. First up, we have this EQ. You can already tell by scooping out those mids, pulling in the highs, and then just really going crazy with the gain. We're already getting some more clickiness. And next up is this plugin called Fresh Air. It basically like excites frequencies in the mid or high highs. It's like a magic plugin. I don't really get how it works, but it sounds great. Even more like punchy and snappy. Next up is this, we have another EQ. Starting to sound more like a kick already. We've got some reverb. And here we have a limiter. I'm kind of using this like a compressor, I guess. I really just jammed it high up and then ducked everything back out with a limiter. Next up, we have the snare sound. And the reason that it's 2 pieces instead of just 1 is because you can get kind of like a flam effect, or like it just makes it sound more crispy if you have 2 audio clips that are like cut very close together. I use this trick a lot, and here is an example of it. So, these are also both randomly kind of pulled from this section again. It could have been from back here, though. Again, I don't feel like it really matters that much when you're really processing these to hell. But anyway, let's talk about what's doing the processing. So without any effects, this is what it sounds like. You can kind of hear already the grit that I'm talking about, maybe? First, we're pitch shifting it up 8 semitones, which should make it easier to punchify. Next up, we have this EQ. It looks pretty dramatic. I think I was trying to, like, micro-edit some annoying frequencies out, but I really just wanted, like, lows and highs, as you can see. Now it's real nice and nasty, which makes for a delightful palette for the mid and high highs to be excited by fresh air again. Alright, last up we got Realm, more reverb. This kind of sounds weird by itself, but if you give it the psh at the same time, you can hear what I was going for. It's getting real, like, fat. It's getting fat. This layer, the click, is just this first half of the source material with a format filter on it, and a crazy Scoopy EQ. I thought this would just make a fun layer for flavor. You can't hear it super well in the finished product, but here it is by itself. It's pretty quiet, but, you know, just a little secret for you and me, I guess. And last up, this is where the low end comes from, the thump track here. And the source for this guy is just this entire back half of this click right here. If you can, I mean, you can probably tell it looks like it, but anyway. So let's talk about what's going on in here. This EQ doesn't do anything. This EQ, on the other hand, does a lot of stuff. This tiny little band right here is roughly the spectrum of frequencies that sound really good on tiny lightsaber speakers if you want, like, low-end punch. That's an insane thing for a normal person to know, but here we are. And then, yeah, super gained, maxed out there. So you can hear what that sounds like real quick. Just a very muffled thump, if you will. I don't know. It's not very interesting yet, but we'll get there. This is a plugin called Infinity Bass. This is another one of those, like, magic plugins that doesn't do anything, like, concrete, but is just an effect that you have to hear to understand. So here's what it does. Which makes it punchier, as the thing would indicate here. Next up is this horrific EQ, and I'm gonna turn on the limiter as well. Now you can hear all of them together, and we have... Sounds pretty good, but we're not done yet. We still have effects that we applied to the entire chain. Okay, so first up we have an EQ here. Gives a little tickle to the high end. And then we have... oh, this is a cool plugin. This is called iHeart New York, or IHNY, and it's basically like a fancy compressor, but it has some other cool stuff down here that makes it kind of can juice up a sound in other ways. I don't know if you can tell, it's just meaner, it's just nastier, which we like. And at the tail end here, just another EQ. You can see what it's doing, scooping out some mids, cutting off some highs, and juicing up some lows. So altogether we have this. And there it is. Next up, let's talk about the ignition sounds. And this would be a great time to talk about one of my favorite plugins of all time, called Weaponizer. So Weaponizer is a sound design tool that sort of helps you aggregate a bunch of different sounds and randomize them and apply effects to them so that you can make iterations of a sound that sound a little different every time you trigger them. So I think the easiest way to show that off is just to demo it. There's this lovely fire button that exists inside the plugin that just lets you trigger what you've set up. So what I've set up sounds like that. That's an ignition. So's that. And so's that. I can do this all day. You can imagine why this would be fun for someone who has to make a bunch of different versions of the same sound, right? Perfect. Basically, you load in a bunch of sounds, you pick, hey, every time I press the fire button, I want this sound to play, this sound to play, this sound to play, this sound to play. I want all of these sounds to play. This is the timing that I want them to play in. I would like the thump to come first, and the onset, then the body, and the tail. So, you know, whatever. This is the mixer over here. I want to hear this much of that, this much of that, this much of this. Here are the effects that I want layered on each of those. And then over here, what you're actually seeing are, like, things that we're doing to the sound. Modulating the speed, modulating the volume. So first up, this is an automaton. Automaton? What are these things called? Whatever. These guys. Magnificent content. Very good. Speed's being modulated, and the volume is being modulated like so. Sort of a neat layer in there. Next up, we have this fun sound of a bathroom fan. Speed also being modulated, and volume tailing off like so. These are footsteps in gravel. Speed is being modulated quite a bit, level trailing off as so. And last but not least, glass being broken. This is all being fed through an EQ, which looks like this. We've got some saturation happening here, we've got a flanger effect, and we've got some ring mod. Love me some ring mod. And altogether, the onset sound sounds like this. Right? Classic stuff. Alright, what is the body made of? The body is made of these 4 sounds here. So this is actually the, these are sounds of the electric razor. The speed being dipped out like this adds quite a bit of odd flavor, I guess. Classic. And then over here, we've got... Those are the shoe squeaks. And the speed also being dipped adds quite a bit to that effect. Next up, we've got... So these are quick cuts from that breathing video that guy sent. Very spooky. Speed being randomly selected here, which gives it a different pitch. And then, yeah, being cut sort of from the middle here adds, like, that sort of choppiness that we're looking for. And then last but not least, we have the bass drum slides. Yeah. Slowed down and sort of faded in and out. So those sounds are the only ones that I processed outside of Weaponizer and then put back into Weaponizer, so we should talk about that real quick. I'm just going to show one example of what I did here. So basically we just added a formant filter, a different one for each version that we made here, and then also a comb filter to add sort of a like flanger sliding effect. Anyway, that's what those are made of. Let's talk about what's on the body, which is saturation, EQ, and ring mod, which all together sounds like... Alright, the thump, which is where I put the impact sound, involves using this click kick sound that we made, and a little bit of the bass drum slide, actually, but sped up, given some randomness, and then very heavily faded in and out, which gives it, well, it sounds quite a bit different than we were just hearing. Which is pretty cool. It's quiet, it's subtle. Anyway, and then the tail, which is what sort of rings out over time, as you can see here, and also includes reverb picked up from the other 3 sections. The tail is composed of this recording, from Alex, which is the sound of a bathroom fan, but there were also some, like, other sounds in there that got picked up in the recording. Like, it sounds like some squeaking birds and something. I don't know what they are. But I thought they sounded cool, actually, so I just left them in. Some of the selections that are options here just include those sounds, because I thought they were neat. There's also a little bit of the brakes on the train that Dan sent in. Speed modulation so that the pitch changes slightly each time. We've got a little tiny bit of very subtle, slowed down and randomized Honda engine idle, which I think is pretty cool. It's subtle, but you can hear it if you're listening for it. So anyway, the tail altogether sounds a little different every time, but when you hear it in context with everything else, and we turn reverb back on, it sounds... So the only other things on top of everything we did in Weaponizer is a, like, half mix of multi-band compression here, which, for the uninitiated, just means that I'm compressing the lows, the mids, and the highs separately, and then choosing how much of each one I want to hear. It's a pretty cool effect. And yeah, this is the simplified view. You can change a whole lot of stuff if you pop this open, but that is not worth going into in this video. We've got a little bit of selective EQing, To be perfectly honest, I don't remember why it looks like this. I must have thought that this looked good when I was making it. And last but not least, a little splash of reverb just to give it some more depth, some more body. So anyway, I just rendered out like a million of these and then picked my favorite 8, and those are the power-ons that made it into the sound font. So yeah, go Weaponizer. All right, let's talk about the Preon, which is the sound that plays before the ignition when you tell the lightsaber to turn on. So the first sound that you're hearing right off the bat is this super cool bass drum sound, which sounds like this by itself. Cool. Yeah, okay. This is an EQ that does nothing. This is a plugin called Crystallizer. It's adding that really dramatic echo that you're hearing. That where it echoes on and on. Yeah, that's coming from this. Some reverb on top of that just makes it bigger. Not sure if you can even tell. And then finally we have this plugin, Meta Pitch. As you'll see, there's nothing happening here, but it's these automation points down here are controlling it. So when I press play, you'll see them change. It's causing it to, like, drop off. The pitch is going down, the formant's going down. So there's how that component works. There's also, you might not notice it, but there's the second effect. This is the sound of a water heater, and it is very quiet, but I'll let you have a listen. Cool. So that, without any of the effects, is just the sound of the water heater turning on. So the first effect on here is this EQ. It's just killing the lows and killing the highs and boosting the mids so that it blends nicely with the bass drum sound we were just talking about, since that's all lows and highs. So here's what that sounds like. Yep. And then we got some reverb. There's going to be a lot of this plugin in this video. And I know because I just looked at all the footage. My god, do I like this plugin. But yeah, here we go. So the reason it does that like big expansion sort of in the middle of the sound is, again, automation points. So it starts off with a size of 0 and ends with a size of 100%. You can see this, yeah. That's kind of a cool effect, I think. Then we have here pitch and formant shift down. Gives it kind of a spooky thing going on there. And then last but not least, we have primal tap, which gives it an echo. So there you go. Altogether, these two. Now you might notice it a little more. It gives it, it's like what that introductory sound is. I don't know. Anyway, the next most obvious sound is the clicky clacky stuff toward the end, which you might recognize here. Cool. So that's just the sound of an X-Acto knife being rattled around. And here's what it sounds like without any effects on it. You might notice that there's a little orange guy in here and that you may have heard a kick sound. You're right, there's a tiny kick in here. There's so much processing that happens on this channel that by the end of the chain, it's almost indistinguishable from just another knock, but it's a little different, and I don't know. I think you can hear it, but you would have to know that it's there to notice it. Anyway, let's talk about what's going on here. As you can see from all of the automation points here, these plugins are all being changed, but I'll show them off. So, first up, grabbing all of the lows and scooping all of the mids makes it sound like this. Next up, phase distortion, which I describe as an air fryer, but for sound. So if you're watching these two, you'll notice that the tone is dropping and drive is increasing as the sound goes on, which gives it just a little more movement. Next up, you'll never believe it, but it's more realm. So yeah, you know what this is. So yeah, the mix knob is being automated to go down and then back up, which I thought made it sound like it was this big thing, and then it gets really small, and then it blows up at the end again, which I think is kind of neat. Ring mod. I don't know how it works, but it basically adds like what sounds like overtones, but you can control the pitch of them. That's the best I can describe it. I'm modulating it, and you'll see and hear exactly what it does right now. That's probably the most distinctive thing that's happening in here. I just adore it. I think it's great. And if you were paying really close attention, you can hear right where that kick comes in because it sounds just a little bit different, especially under ring mod, than the other sounds do. Have another listen if you'd like. Anyway, okay, so this is a comb filter, which it's basically a flanger, but you control right where it moves. You should be able to see the band moving up and down here. Just gives it more movement. I'm going to keep using the same buzzwords. And then at the end here is a pitch shifter, which is also being modulated. You'll see how that changes over time. So yeah, all that stuff together makes this very odd clicking sound that I'm quite fond of. So the only things we haven't talked about yet are the tiny kick sound that sounds like a false ignition before the real one. This is not complicated. It is just the kick sound that we talked about earlier, but it is shorter so that the low end doesn't have time to like ring out. Makes it sound a lot like tighter and smaller. Honestly, listening to it now, it's kind of weird that it sounds so much like the kick in context, because by itself it just sounds like a little like click. But yeah, it does. Weird how brains work, I guess. And then last but not least, there's this very strange like metal tin rattling sound. Okay, I don't know what it is. It's the sound of some kind of metal tin clanking, I think he said. It is sped up very much and sent through some effects. Here's a listen without any effects on it. Yeah, not a complicated effects chain. We've got some multi-band compression here. So here's what it sounds like with a little bit of multi-band compression. Yeah, it might be hard to tell what that's doing because the sound is so short. It just spreads the frequencies out, makes it sound juicier. So this is the only plugin that's being automated. It starts a full octave up, and then you'll see it drop. Same with the format shifting here. And then I feel like I don't even need to say it, but there's reverb. This is also a pretty short reverb. The mix is pretty high, which I think just makes it sound bigger. But yeah. Anyway, there's that sound. I feel like these two sound way better in context than they do out of context. So here is the full sound without any interruption from me. Anyway, there's one of 4 Preons. I'm not going to show the other ones because we will be here literally all night if I did. But the other Preons are structured very much the same way. They use different rattles of the X-Acto knife, they use different recordings of the bass drum. A lot of these parameters are modulated differently, but they're all the same structure, so. And yeah, those are the Preons. I think they turned out great. So the next sound that probably makes sense to show off is the power off sound, what happens when you retract your lightsaber. So what this is made of, I rendered out a bunch of ignitions, but then I muted the thump and the body. So I was just getting tail and onset, and then I reversed those and added crazy compression. Anyway, these are my favorite 8. I'll just show a couple off here. Anyway, that's what the power offs are made of. Moving on. Okay, so after handling the power on and power off, I think it makes sense to show off the hum next. That is comprised of, as you can see, quite a few different layers. Let's talk about this one real quick. This is a granular synthesizer. And basically what this does is, if you can see this timeline down here, if you drop in a sound, and then you select a section of the sound, it will loop that section however fast you tell it to, with whatever shape you want it to, with whatever density, with all of these extra effects on. But it's essentially like, I mean, a synthesizer is just a repeating sound, but this is a granular synthesizer, meaning that the sound that it is looping comes from a granular piece of like recorded audio, or whatever you want. You can put whatever you want in here. So anyway, granulizer just sounds like this. What I fed it, actually, maybe you can guess. Any guesses? All right, I'll tell you. It's motorcycle sounds. Which is cool. I mean, I took such a tiny little baby piece of it. If you can even see it, I still feel like you can tell. You can still like kind of hear it, which I think is neat. On top of that, we add multi-band compression. We add our little pitch shift. Changes the note a little bit. And last but not least, we add our little bump of EQ. Next up, this is that bowl sound. Plus compression makes it a lot quieter and consistent. Plus our pitch shift makes it. And plus round makes it. You can hear that tone start coming in. And then last but not least, we have, this isn't going to make a huge difference, but just focuses the sound a little, for lack of another better term. Next up, let's talk about the water cooler. The water cooler has very minimal processing, just an EQ. Yeah, sounds like this. Turns out this is a pretty easy sound to work with. I thought that, mixed with this, added enough, makes it sound like it's a machine, but also like it's alive. And then this tonal stuff helps it feel more like energy, you know, less like a mechanical machine and more like magic. So, alright, I've waited long enough. Let's talk about the bass clarinet. This is the most distinctive sound that you can hear in the hum, for sure. I really went to town on the crossfading. When this sound is crossfaded, you get a lot of really interesting, like, the way that the sound waves were overlapping caused a lot of, like, weird interference. Take my word for it, this was a good idea. Okay, so, this bass clarinet sound, without any of its, extra effects on top, just sounds like this. Okay, you can kind of hear what I'm talking about with the, crossfading, like a flanger effect, but it's really cool. Whatever it is, it's cool. The way that the frequencies are, like, fighting for space. I thought it was cool. Compressor makes it compressed. Distortion adds just a little bit of extra flavor. Heat wave brings a lot out there. And then MoTT, multiband compression, I mean, boosts the low end and the mids, and then just compresses the high end, but doesn't, like, raise or lower it. I really slammed this too. This is at 100%, so. And last but not least, we have this EQ. There is a particularly, like, annoying frequency that was showing up right here, and these frequencies here were just taking up too much space when it was fighting with the other stuff, so altogether, here is the hum. Moving right along, blasters. It's Weaponizer again! Yay! Let's talk about the sounds that we use. So first up, the onset by itself sounds like this. The, like, click-clacking X-Acto knife sound, I thought kind of reminded me of the fuel rod cannon from Halo, if you grew up with the Halo games. It's not like a perfect, I don't know, it just like reminded me of it. I don't know. So anyway, thought that made sense for a blaster deflection sound. As you can see, the speed is just being modulated here so that you get a little bit of pitch variance. Here, very quietly, we have the birds. And then, last but not least, we've got some glass. Besides that, we just have some saturation, and the EQ is just cutting out a lot of low end, and then boosting some mids and a little bit of highs. Next up, we have the body, which sounds like this. Not your traditional blaster sound, but I'm here to have a good time. Okay, different components here. We have motorcycle sounds. The speed being modulated there is the big thing that's making it sound not like motorcycle sounds. Down here, we have that video. I didn't know what it was, but it was kind of that, like, buzzing sound, and the video component had, like, water in it. It's very strange, but the speed being modulated here, again, is sort of like the big motivator of why it sounds so bizarre. Down here, we've got glass being broken. And last but not least, we have the automaton. Boy, I hope I'm saying that right. I've said it so many times in this video already. I feel like a broken record, but speed being modulated is the thing that makes it sound weird. So, all together, we have... Yeah. Alright, thump is up next. The thump is made from just the impact sound that I showed off earlier, varying levels to kind of give it sometimes it should sound more heavy, sometimes it should sound more like punchy and clicky, if that makes sense. Using a little bit of both. And then also I took like sections of that metal tin clanking sound and just put them in here, double sped up to make them basically just as a pitch shifter is all that does, and it plays the sound faster. So altogether, it sounds like this. And then the tail is only 2 sounds. So these are train sounds. And as you can see, the speed starts slow and then gradually speeds up, but the level fades out pretty fast. So you just get... All right, and then the only other thing that I pulled from was actually the same video, but just towards the beginning, there were some other train sounds that I liked. I don't know what I'm pulling this from, but they kind of reminded me just of, like, the sounds of weapons cooling off, like both of these did. Both are very, very quiet, so you might not even notice they're there, but... Besides that, just a little bit of EQing here, and then toss a little bit of reverb on there, just for funsies. Then I just rendered like a million of these. I grabbed my favorite 32, and those are all of the blasters that you can hear in the final sound font. Did the same thing for clashes, which we should talk about next. Yeah, it's Weaponizer! You know the drill. Let's talk it through. First up, we have the electric razor sounds once again. Speed is modulated somewhat, level fades out pretty quick. Here we have some snowblower ignition sounds. Just modulating speed is the only thing that changes there. Here we have Tanner's recording. And then last but not least, of course, the broken glass sound effect. So altogether, the onset sounds like this. Nice for like a clashing sound. I don't know why I'm acting it out for the freaking... The body of this sound is made up of these 4 pieces. First up, we have this guy. You'll never guess what sound that is. Next up, we have Brian Connor's dehumidifier. It's slowed down quite a bit with a little bit of variance coded in, and then just trails off. Makes it sound like the lightsaber is like reacting angrily to being struck. This is the automaton, yet again. It's gonna turn out that I'm saying that wrong in this entire video. It's gonna be too late for me to re-record it, but here we go. So yep, speed is affecting the pitch there, and then I'm having it kind of like dip in and out. And then this is a little bit tricky, but I rendered out the lockup sound, which we'll get to in a moment, which is the sound that plays, that's supposed to be like when a lightsaber is like locked against another one and you're holding it there and it's sparking and crackling. I ended up putting pieces of the lockup back into the clash because, for one thing, it's consistent that way. And I kind of like the way that the lockups turned out in this particular sound font, so here's what they sound like. They almost sound like hi-hats there. All together, that's the body, which sounds like this. Cool. All right, the thump, I think is pretty simple on this one. Yep, it's just the kick, and then Brian sent in those wheel spinning sounds. The speed varies quite a bit to give it pitch. I feel like I've said that a million times. Level modulates somewhat, and also I just decided to give it like a tiny bit of variation in the speed for the kick, just in this sound to make it sound a little bit different. I don't know. And last but not least, let's talk about the tail, which is made of a few different sounds. I used the bathroom fan from Alex Berg again. I sped it up quite a bit and gave it lots of variance there. So here's what it sounds like. Next up, we have, these are more sounds from the train. I just love that train video. And then we have Jordan's water heater as the final layer here. Yep, I don't know. Oh, something... okay, I forgot to talk about this with the blasters. It doesn't really matter, but the timing that you decide to use for these layers can often make like a pretty huge difference, and especially with the clash sounds, I like it when the onset comes in a little bit before the thump, so that there's like kind of the flam effect that I was talking about with the kick when I was making it, which it's like there's a snap and then there's a thump, and when they both happen, it doesn't meld together as well, and that like weird not blending sounds good. Anyway, those are the clashes. Let's move on to... Okay, I'm gonna be honest. There are a few sounds in Soundfont making that are pretty boring, so I'm gonna go through these really fast. When you make a start lock or start drag sound, it's the sound that triggers when you begin a lockup, right? And normally all I do for these is I just grab like a punchy, clicky sound that I've got. In this case, I just use like the kick that I've got. And then the very end of the lockup loop, so that when this finishes playing, it's queued up to begin the lockup that it corresponds with. So all this sounds like is... More interestingly, here's the lockup and drag section. So in the demo video, you just see a lockup, but there's an additional feature of some lightsabers where you can like drag the tip along the ground, and I usually just play a lockup sound that's got the low end filtered out, so it sounds like a smaller version of the lockup, for lack of better terms. So anyway, I'm just going to focus on what the lockup is made of, because it's the same thing that the drags are made of. So here's what I did. Basically just I used these two sounds, the fan and the water cooler. So the fan sound without any effects just sounds like this. Felt like a good candidate to me for something that was very crispy. Sounded like there was crispy potential. First of all, well, I'll start from the top. So, okay, usually when I make lockup sounds, I want them to be heavily distorted, heavily compressed, and mostly like mid-high to high range. And normally I make them out of like the sounds of ripping paper or like crumpling things, or I made it with lettuce once. I took a head of lettuce and just shredded it in front of a microphone. That worked great, by the way. So without those tools, I had to kind of figure out how can I recreate some of those like ripping sounds, right? I think what I did was kind of cool. So with just the EQ, all I got left was... Here's a weird one. Reaffir, which is, this is a plugin that just comes with Reaper, has this cool thing where you can automatically build a sound profile that you want to remove from a sound. So this is the most useful if you have, like, if you're recording something and there was some background sound that you want to subtract and just have the sounds that you want from what you're recording. You take a piece of that recording with only the background sound, you feed it into this plugin, and then you say, anything that sounds like this, take it out, basically. So this is what the sound profile of the background noise from this video sounds like, represented as sort of like an EQ, and we are in subtract mode. So this is actually removing anything that fits this sound profile. This little piece is what I ripped out. So what we end up with is... Bear with me. I know it sounds really weird, but I wanted to just get the crackly bits out, that like rattling sound. Bear with me. I promise it turned out to be a good idea. This is another Krotos plugin from the same people that make Weaponizer called Dehumanizer. What you're supposed to use this effect for is to make your change your voice, so you can do like monster effects, or you can make yourself sound like a robot. You can do all this stuff, but the interface is pretty self-explanatory. You have like your track input, and then you have all these different tools you can work with, and then you can sort of drag and drop these effects into here, and then you can choose like, hey, I want this to feed into that, or like in some cases you can say, hey, I want this to feed into this, and then rejoin together in the future. You can do all sorts of cool stuff. So what I did for this one is basically I sent the track input through granular synth. Already sounds a little better, something I can work with, right? We toss in some pitch shifting. The vocoder was the key. I basically just had the pitch down at almost as low as it could go, and you get... Ring mod just adds a little bit of flavor. And that's it. That's That's all we did in Dehumanizer. On top of that, distortion, like I said, always helpful. Already bringing a lot of that power back. A little bit of compression. And then some EQ to take out some of those annoying parts of the band. And last but not least, brown gives it a lot more body. It's a short decay, but it's pretty heavily mixed, 50-50 almost. So anyway, that's half of the lockup. So the other half is made from this water cooler sound. Yeah, so the water cooler sound got sent through a whole bunch of effects, as you can see. Let's start with just the EQ. Phase distortion makes it sound a little bit nastier. A phaser on top of that gives it some movement. Some more I Heart New York. You can tell it's actually starting to sound like a welder almost. Realm adds some body. And then I added some more distortion on top. But yeah, now we have like a bona fide, you know, electrical crackle here. And all we need to do is dip out those super annoying mids to leave behind. That. Yep, that's the lockup. By some miracle, we are almost done. Endlocks. In case it wasn't inferred from the Startlocks, the sound plays after a lockup. So all this is the kick here, and then I actually took a piece of the lockup. This is just the dehumanizer component of the bathroom fan, which sounds like this without any effects. Not tremendously interesting. The only thing on top of that is a comb filter, heavily mixed, and it does a little sweep. It goes up and then down, and that makes it sound more interesting. Sounds like this. I didn't go too crazy with this one. It's just 4 different versions of that. That's all there is to talk about there. All right, let's talk about smooth swings. Smooth swings are basically the sound that you hear when you are swinging the lightsaber around. If you swing it hard, you get an accent swing, which we'll talk about in a minute, but as long as the lightsaber is in motion, you're hearing smooth swings. So the way these are programmed is there are low and high, and depending on what lightsaber you have, it will fade between the two. It's kind of a weird system, but just basically what I had to do was render out 6 different versions of these swinging sounds, and then make alternate versions for each one. It's kind of weird, but we'll just take it a step at a time. So let's just talk about an example here of one of the swings. So, what is this made of? This is made of exactly 2 things. We have the guitar auto bow recording, which is super cool. And then we have another wonderful use of granulizer, my fave. So what I ended up doing, this is Melodyne. All this does is keeps the pitch more correct. Correct meaning mixing with the other sounds in the sound font. So yeah, this is just a tuned version of that original autobow recording. Now we can talk about the effects. This EQ isn't doing anything. This Saturator sure is. This is a fun little plugin. With a little bit of fuzz, we get... As you can see, there are a lot of things being modulated here that you can also see being modulated live in the plugin. That would be the drive, fuzz, and color. You'll never guess what we did here. This is MoTT once again. We pop this bad boy on, and we're gonna just get a ton more mids. Right, next up is this plugin called Radiator. This is just another amp. This one adds quite a lot of nastiness. As you can see, it's pretty slammed. And then at the very end, we just have Realm, which gives it body. So that's what's happening on this front. What's happening down here? This is Granulizer, once again, and Granulizer is being used very much in the same way that we saw earlier. This is the motorcycle clip once again. It's looped in a different spot, and this configuration is very different, but still, it's going to sound pretty familiar. Granulizer by itself sounds like this. Then some good old-fashioned multiband compression. Just kind of wake it up. And then we got some pitch shifting to make it fit. This just cuts out. Usually when you see something like this, it's because there's an annoying frequency that I wanted to duck out. All in all, we have. And together with our good friend, Mr. Otto Bow Guitar, we have. The rest of the Smoothswings are just variations on what I showed you. They're all built from the same, like, fundamental building blocks, so I can just show you, like, as an example. Here's the second one. Pretty grody. Maybe one more example. Here's number 3. Oh, yeah, I used a format filter on this one to give the guitar a little bit of a different tone. If I move this around, you'll hear it change quite a bit. Anyway, and then this is just a different configuration. Anyway. And then, yeah, so once I had these 6 rendered out, then I took them over to this section. This is the other sound that it will fade between. Again, it's very strange, but yeah, every modern lightsaber requires that you have this, so. Anyway, usually what I do is I do make it sound a little different, but I'll take, like, the original recordings of the swings that I make, and I'll make, like, one tweak that makes them sound a little different, so that you do get some variation, which is kind of fun. In this case, it's phaser, so. It's subtle, but this is more like unstable and kind of warbly is what a phaser. I don't know how to describe what a phaser does. It does what a phaser does. And then, yeah, the last thing we need to talk about are these accent swings. So all of these are cut from different sections of different swings, and then they are given a little bit of EQ. They are format shifted to give them sort of like a harsher sound since they're supposed to be accents. A little bit of ring mod. Let me show you what that does actually, because it's interesting. Ring mod's freaking weird. Here's without, and here's with. It's very strange, but it's the frequency that changes it. So you get. All of these have just an overtone added to them because I think it sounds interesting. And then there's also some reverb. I usually use some sort of like delay-infused reverb to give it almost an echo or like a double back sound. Here, you'll just hear it. I don't know why, but in practice, in swinging it around, it does make it feel more real, and I don't know why. It doesn't really make sense that like a swing would echo, but I don't know. I've done this on a bunch of other sound fonts, and it always sounds good. I always prefer it that way, so it's kind of a standard practice at this point. But yeah, there you go. That was, that was a lot. We talked about the punch. We talked about the Preon, power on, power off, hum, blaster, clash, start lock, lockup, end lock, swing, and smooth swing. Those are the components that make up a sound font. I think they're pretty fun to make. They're very fun to swing around. And yeah, this one that I'm demoing here is free. So if you have a lightsaber or you're interested in this stuff at all, download it because it's cool. Yeah, I'm very tired. I'm gonna go eat dinner now. I hope this looks good after I edit it. God.